Sony just released their new entry-level cinema camera, the FX3. But it's kind of a weird product. Is the FX3 a masterpiece or a misfire? Let's find out. So I'm not going to waste your time going super in-depth on the specs of the FX3, as they're basically the same as the A7s III, but feel free to pause here if you want to check them out. And this is where the problems begin and end with the FX3 really. It has the exact same sensor, internals and specs as the A7s III, has no AVF, but is more expensive. Sure, the FX3 comes with unique features like the XLR top handle and an active cooling system, but is this enough to differentiate it from the A7s III? Let's start by talking about that XLR module that comes with the FX3. I think this is actually its best asset, as it attaches to the hot shoe, is secured to the body with thumb screws, and comes in the box with the FX3. As a corporate and commercial videographer, I can see this being really useful when shooting interviews with XLR microphones. Having said that, Sony offers the same K3M XLR module as a standalone purchase that can be added to their other modern mirrorless cameras, such as the A7s III, so this option is already available. It's worth noting that the FX3's implementation is superior for two reasons. Firstly, the handle and module are more securely attached using two thumb screws that line up with the thread mounts on the body, whereas the standalone K3M only attaches using the hot shoe. And secondly, the FX3 integrates its XLR module into a top handle with no extra wires, whereas a similar top handle setup using a separate K3M module on a mirrorless camera would require a hot shoe extension cable, adding extra bulk and more points of failure. Next, let's look at the fan. Many people have been asking why the FX3 needs a fan when the A7s III manages to record in the same codecs and frame rates with little to no overheating. So, there's 2 points to this answer. Number 1. While rare, the A7s III does overheat for certain users in higher frame rates in hotter climates. And 2. Traditionally, as a camera sensor heats up, the image it produces gets noisier, which results in the camera applying more aggressive noise reduction, which in turn makes the image appear more muddy. So basically the FX3 will be able to record without time limits and crucially, maintain great image quality at all times. Having said that, I've been using the A7s III, which I'm shooting on now, for over 6 months. It's never overheated and I haven't noticed any hit to the image quality when shooting in hotter environments. Disclaimer, British hot weather basically means anytime you can safely wear a t-shirt and it's not raining, so your mileage may vary. So I guess the active cooling system on the FX3 can be thought of more as an insurance policy that you may never need than an essential feature. Okay, so what is the FX3 missing? Let's briefly touch on the EVF. It's a matter of personal preference, but I actually use the EVF on my A7s III fairly regularly to help compose shots on those rare British sunny days where the screen isn't viewable. Sony's decision to not include an EVF on the FX3 is kind of baffling, especially as the body is very similar to its recent compact full-frame camera, the A7C, which included a smaller EVF. I think Sony should have included this style of EVF on the FX3, as it would keep the top of the camera flat, still allowing for the use of the XLR module top handle. The FX3 is also missing an internal variable ND. The smaller body size of the FX3 means there simply isn't enough room for such a system, but I'm not sure why Sony didn't just make the camera a little taller to allow space for those ND filters. ND filters are essential for video shooters, as they allow us to shoot at fast apertures in bright lighting conditions, and it's a real shame that they're not included on the FX3. In addition to this, along with internal NDs, the FX3 is the only camera in Sony's cinema lineup to not allow you to use shutter angle instead of shutter speed. Shutter angle is the standard for cinema cameras, as it automatically adjusts the shutter with changes to the frame rate, ensuring that motion blur is consistent with the 180-degree shutter rule or any other value that may be used for stylistic purposes. As most situations require the use of a 180-degree shutter, shutter angle allows us to set and forget that 180 value and change frame rates freely. If the A7s III didn't exist, the FX3 would seem like an impressive camera with a killer set of specs. But as is, does the FX3 make sense for most users? Personally, I don't think it does. The inclusion of the XLR handle module and fan is nice, but they're by no means essential features. In fact, the A7s III manages just fine without a fan, and you can purchase a nearly identical XLR module for that camera if you need to use professional mics. Perhaps more frustrating is the lack of internal NDs and shutter angle, both things that are all but essential in modern cinema cameras. The FX3 is a great camera, but it just seems like an awkward fit in Sony's cinema lineup. Sony has clearly taken parts from the A7s III, added a K3M XLR module and a fan, and called it a day. They could have taken a little bit more time and care, included internal ND filters and shutter angle, and created something truly unique. As it stands, it makes more sense to either go with the A7s III and save yourself some money, or spend a bit more and get the true entry-level Sony cinema camera, the FX6. If you enjoyed this video, here's 2 more you'll like. And while you're deciding which one to watch next, tell me your thoughts on the FX3 and how it compares to the A7s III in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.